for words and the magazine. And I just dived into the last bit of it, and what an honor to just be involved within the community and to see all the wonderful faces doing amazing things, and just recognizing that recognition, especially from within our community, for our community. So it's great. I know I just went right into it because I was excited. But I want to thank all of our sponsors, Boomer Graphics and Signs, Rivera Nayarit, and Mijalisco and Zapopan, for everything that they do, and especially Rivera Nayarit for hosting this Friday's event. It was my partner's birthday. She wasn't here. We had a snowstorm. So happy birthday to her. And I hope she had fun.
I certainly did. It was a lot of fun.
Shout out,
I was very surprised.
shout out, shout out to Johnny G for being on the ones and twos and keeping everybody entertained, especially my sister Happy Feet and Jasmine, just killing it. And everybody that came out. Thank you guys so much for helping us celebrate somebody wonderful that we appreciate. Also, if you are in the uh, if you are in the hunt for a little room for like 30 people or plus, and you're looking for a decorator, you're looking for somewhere to host this event, and then you know how it goes. It goes, you look for a decorator, you look for an event place, and then you got to get a caterer. Well, why not have a one-stop shop like Rivera Nayarit, which they have an event room right in the back, really cozy, great, an atmosphere privately for you and your loved ones. And a big shout out to Maciel Ideas. She does a phenomenal job, just decorating for a lot of people within our community. She actually decorated Jasmine's backdrop, and it was really wonderful. Just to have all these different people coming together, and that's why the magazine cover of 603 Diversity is called Generating Connections. And that's what we do here at Fresh and Multimedia. We connect a lot of wonderful entrepreneurs in the community that not necessarily get the recognition that they deserve, or maybe don't know where to turn out. We bridge that gap, and we appreciate all of our sponsors and all of our supporters out there for keeping this forward. And we have on the line, we have none other than the 603 Diversity Vice President, Ernesto. How are you today, sir?
Well, how are you doing?
Good, good, good. Thank you so much for joining us on the show today. And thank you for the opportunity of having us on the cover. What an amazing honor.
Hey, you guys look great on the cover, and it's a great story, and so I'm super pleased that it all came together.
Tell us a little bit about what inspired the magazine, and how does that work? Putting all these people into one magazine, and making sure that their stories come to life. How does all those components come together?
Boy, those are great questions, and I feel like to describe that, I almost have to go back to like some of our other publications. So the we do New Hampshire Magazine and New Hampshire Business Review, as well as 603 Diversity and New Hampshire Home, and our parent company, which is Yankee Publishing, does Yankee Magazine, which many people might know, and the Old Farmer's Almanac, which has been around since the 1700s. But all of these magazines tell stories about the people and the communities that they serve in different ways, And one of the things a couple of years ago, when I think diversity, equity, and inclusion really came to top of mind for many Americans during the summer of 2020, a lot of the comments that I was hearing were around, especially in media, were around representation,
Right.
and so we started, and I was I was doing work with our own magazines. I was doing work with the Chamber of Commerce and some of here in Manchester and some of their DEI efforts. And it occurred to me that there was room in the media space in New Hampshire for a magazine that specifically took a look at diversity, not from a perspective of I guess, not from a perspective of only the challenges or only the bad news or only the difficulties, but the just the accomplishments and great things that were going on in the diverse communities throughout the state, and in that way, sort of providing that representation, both for people who are here in the state now, but also for people who are outside the state thinking of moving here, or if you just moved here and you wonder if you're the only person within a specific kind of community. It's nice to be able to have another outlet that says, yeah, you're not.
That's really interesting that you say about the inclusion, because there was a fluctuation that was happening, and when we hear these stories here constantly, we always wonder, like, reaching out to the Chamber of Commerce, how come there wasn't so much representation within the BIPOC community, and still isn't. There's still an opportunity. How did these stories come to life? How do you fish these? How do you search for these individuals, or how do these stories get brought to your attention? And how do you pick? Because there's a lot of amazing individuals in the cover and on the magazine, but there's still much more out there. How do you select these? Because we had the privilege of having my partner, my producer, actually write one of the pieces, and when we were looking at each other, and we were like, who's a great candidate that is actually making a staple, who is a staple within our state, and also projecting the community forward, to be able to highlight them. It was a challenge because there was so many individuals. How do you guys go about that?
Well, I think you've sort of hit on it in one way, right? And that is, we look to contributors who are members of different communities in the state, and look to them for their instincts as to what an important story to tell is. And so, and by the way, Jasmine did a great job. She wrote the upfront business profile, the immigration attorney Enrique Mesa, and so we really appreciate that. But her insight and her instincts, I think, are part of what we're looking for when we're looking for contributors to the magazine. We very specifically don't start out with a set of specific stories. We set out looking for a set of people to tell the stories that are important to them. Right.
How do you keep it authentic to, we talk about 603 diversity. How many people, how many diversity, how much of that diversity isn't in the employment of the magazine?
It depends on whether you're talking about the writers, or the actual, let's say, the larger staff here at McLean Communications.
I'm talking about the magazine specifically.
So the contributors to the magazine, what we've tried to do is again sort of look specifically to the diverse communities that we're covering, mm-hmm. for the writers who are going to be contributing to the magazine, and make that almost exclusive. Mm-hmm. So really, but I think the interesting question that comes up out of that. So I guess, parenthetically, I would say, in some ways, it's 100% written by members of diverse communities who we're telling the stories about. Those are also the folks who are writing the stories.
Yeah, that's by design. Yeah, that's what I wanted to highlight. I wanted to highlight how amazing of a job you guys are doing of making sure that the stories are being told by those individuals that are living and breathing within those communities as well. What does it take to run a magazine? What are because anybody can just buy a magazine at Barnes and Nobles or your local, CVS or newsstand. But what is it? What are the components that it takes to publish a magazine?
Um, I mean, there's quite a bit that goes into it. There's of course, I think the first thing that people think of would be the writers, and you've got to have great writers and contributors. You also need strong editors.
Right.
Every piece that we publish is both has the benefit of having a really great writer working on it and also a really great editor reading that piece for both style and clarity, but also things like just sort of perfecting the prose, and so the writer and the editor are really always partners in a magazine project. And then also from an editorial perspective, there's also just the managing of the workflow and the wrangling of the copy and getting that in on time. There's photography that we commission. So we'll have a photographer scheduling appointments, and somebody's sort of doing air traffic control for all of that.
Yeah.
And in that case, you met Rick Broussard, and he really handled a ton of that logistical stuff on this issue, and actually on the last one too. He's also the editor of New Hampshire Magazine, and is really phenomenal at doing all of that, sort of pulling it together as it comes in. But then you've got also, the magazine is supported by advertising, so we have an ad sales team that it consists of a salesperson and a sales manager, and to some degree me. I also reached out to sponsors and underwriters on behalf of the magazine. And so that's sort of what it takes to pay for it, because it's a free distribution magazine.
Right.
But then you have the printing, and right now that actually has become, over the past 2 years, really one of the big challenges in magazine publishing is we're experiencing both a paper shortage, supply chain issues around paper and ink. A lot of the factories that used to create paper for printing magazines have switched over their creation process, or switched over their factories essentially. So now they're making cardboard boxes. All those cardboard boxes that get shipped out all over the world when somebody orders from Amazon. Some factory has to produce those, and factories decided we'd be better out, we'd make more money producing those than making paper for magazines. And so that's driven up the cost of paper and limited the supply. So we got paper and ink, and we have a great printer here up in Hooksett that prints these for us. And then another big piece of the magazine project in general is distribution. How do you get it out to the rest of the world? And in this case, we have some pretty powerful distribution channels to get it sort of out to the state. And two of those are New Hampshire Magazine and New Hampshire Business Review. And so we literally send it to every single person who gets New Hampshire Magazine, and we send it to every single person who gets New Hampshire Business Review, and then we distribute it at Chamber of Commerce's. We also send it for free to small businesses that request it. If they want them in their lobby, they can get them there as well. And so that's and we're looking for ways to expand that distribution as we go along also. And people, of course, can go online and ask and buy a copy and have us ship it out to them as well.
That's amazing. That's really interesting that the price of paper is going up. You would think that with everything going digital, there would be some wiggle room for that and some opportunity.
Yeah, it would have been great if that's how it worked out. I guess, but the real challenge there was that when they did see so many things going digital, I think rather than drop the price of paper, they switched over what they were using their factory to make.
What inspired you to become a journalist and to get involved in the magazine industry, in the publishing industry?
I think it was, I loved books when I was a kid. They were my most constant companions, and I felt like I lived in whole worlds inside of them, imaginatively. And And so, I've actually really had, I think, an emotional relationship to books too. From the very youngest time that I can remember, my great grandmother lived next door to us, and she, would, like, my first memories are being read to by her and my grandmother and my mother. So, I think I always wanted to write, and I did. You know, I did other things as well when I was younger. I played music and did some theater, but I really, writing was a passion, and journalism was a way to make a living at that. And over time, some of that passion morphed not only into telling stories by writing, but in terms of telling bigger stories by being able to pull together, whole magazines. And I've been very lucky. I've gotten to do a lot of digital technology stuff for newspapers and magazines, and as in the case of 603 Diversity, sort of get to spearhead a new magazine, and that's it's been a real privilege.
Spearheading a new magazine. What has what's the biggest inspiration moving forward with this magazine, and what's the trajectory? Meaning, like, what exactly do you want this magazine to become for the BIPOC community?
That's a great question. We're evolving it. Each issue feels like it's evolving,
Right.
And in some ways we're still learning what it could become, and in some ways we're looking for that community, and even beyond, BIPOC communities. We're also looking to cover diverse communities that represent diversity in different ways. So LGBTQ communities and different religious and ethnic backgrounds. But what we really want to do is let those different communities tell their stories through this particular vehicle in the way that they want to tell them, and really provide, again, I think it goes back to that idea of representation. And I think that representation, both creates a reason for people to feel at home. It creates inclusion, but it also introduces neighbors to neighbors. So that for the people in the state, who may not have a good sense of all of the amazing things that are happening within any given diverse community. They're from a part of the state where they're not meeting people who are different from them. They can have a sense that the stories of these communities are more than the occasional crime story out of Manchester, right? Which I think is, the kind of negative stereotype that gets built up over time if there's not good representation.
Right. One thing that I felt about this magazine was, usually when you're a part of a piece, it feels like it's just everything was thrown. Usually when you're written about, or if they bring the shed light, like I've been on the newspaper, stories when the first journey of First in American and First in Multimedia, and I felt like I was just a part of a piece of a whole, different story piece. I just didn't feel like there was something that fit. I didn't feel like I fit in. But being on this magazine and seeing all the wonderful familiar faces of my community, like Romy Camille, and talking about, Mama Lou's restaurant in Tingsboro, seeing Heidi and her husband, and seeing, Enrique Mesa, and, written by my partner, and then a special shout out to Dave Villacis, from the National Children's Home. All these wonderful connections. It's just, this magazine just feel right, and having my good friend and my longtime friend Manny Ramirez on the previous cover, it just felt like something was right about this, and the way that it's moving, and Mola Foods, and just to name a few individuals. A big shout out to Roberto Ortiz for Roberto Ortiz for just taking his time to kind of coach us and saying, "This is what you guys you. I want you guys in your element, and I want to portray the essence of that element through the lens." And what a phenomenal job! What a great team. Speaking about team, we have one of your colleagues on the line. Shout out to Rick. Rick, can you hear us?
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yes, I can. Welcome, welcome. So Rick actually reached out and kind of shadowed us for a couple of hours throughout the studio, and you guys written these. You guys, when I reached out to Rick this morning, he said I can't take all the credit. The credit, Ernesto did a wonderful job bringing this piece together. So I wanted to grab Rick on the line and kind of tell him about his journey and his story within the 603 Diversity magazine and how this all came about.
You know, I'm glad to speak to something that my role with this is sort of in the background, and what I'm really proud of that I've been doing is I kind of got charged with trying to find the journalists to make this happen, because when we first started on this, that was the thing that we both recognized. We cannot do this if it's just another New Hampshire magazine project. We've got great writers and artists, but they're the ones that we use all the time. They're not a very diverse, I mean, they're not a very ethnically or racially diverse group. They're all weirdos like me, but
In a good
but
way,
you know,
in a good way.
yeah, but we needed to find a group of journalists, and I'll be candid. When we first started, well, maybe we can't do that because we haven't been hearing from a lot of journalists of color in the state.
Right.
And the minute we started looking, we realized, well, that was a dumb thing to say, because there's lots of, like Roni, there's a lot, or Robert Ortiz, there's very talented people who've been working and basically just making it work without us,
Right.
for a long time. So it wasn't like we discovered them; they were already there and doing what they did. We just finally enlisted them in the effort. And my goal really is to kind of get out, fade from this, and let it be their thing, which is increasingly happening. But that's pretty much what I'm doing in the background, is trying to keep that group of of ethnic cats and together, and long enough for them to have their own identity. I think one issue is all it took. This issue, they're much more working like a team. They want to work together. They, not all of them know. You're pretty well connected, Oscar, but a lot of these people, particularly journalists, sometimes aren't that well connected because they just work in their little, their little, rabbit holes, or that their little warrens, the places that they operate. And so those connections, I know you're all about connections, and that to me is the most exciting thing about this, is that we've got a group of really talented journalists, artists, photographers who know each other. They're communicating. We had a party for them after the first issue. We'll probably have another get together like that, where we can kind of build that community and then step aside and just let it do its thing.
And that is a beautiful thing and to hear you say that out loud is a beautiful thing, because it's always about what Ernesto was saying earlier. It's always about the diversity and inclusion, but sometimes it feels like checking a box and feeling like we don't belong. And then all of a sudden saying, hey, we would like to highlight about your community, but not let you speak about it. And then we will represent it the way that we envision it. And thank you very much for your story. See you later. But no, you guys really did a phenomenal job, especially Rick, when you were in here shadowing us and kind of you called a couple of times and said, hey, we would like to reach out about the 603 Diversity magazine. We kind of going back and forth for a couple of weeks, and I said, listen, I can say our story and our journey until I'm blue in the face, but why don't you come down to the studio and just take a look, feel the energy because First Gen American is the show. First Gen Multimedia is half women owned, half minority owned business. Aside from the other partners, that you don't see that are in the background, but this is the essence of the business, and for every Latino, there's a strong woman and there's a strong Latina in the background keeping that momentum forward. So it was important not for me to speak for my team, but for let my team speak for themselves, and that connection grew from there, which gave an inspiration to have Jasmine like she does here with the bios and connecting with some of the guests, being able to have her step a foot forward and give her right light to shine in and write a beautiful piece with one of our sponsors that
Right.
connects, that inspires somebody that heard the show and said, I have an individual that is going through something through immigration, and you did that piece and you invited him on the show, and you guys, he's one of your sponsors. Can you connect me with him? And that's what our community has been doing for many decades here in New Hampshire. It's just connecting one to another without, under the radar, without having like a center, without having a location. And now it's just growing exponentially, and now we see a lot of individuals saying, we would love to highlight this in Spanish, please.
Yes.
What can we do? So it's just truly a wonderful. What just like I asked Ernesto, Rick, what is some of your inspirations and what is some of your visions for 603 diversity moving forward?
Well, as I said, my main inspiration is this pool of talent. I mean, that's kind of what we're about at New Hampshire Magazine, is finding talented, interesting communities, and because everybody kind of knows, what they need to know about the state as a whole. And then what's more interesting are these little, I guess, there's just little ecologies, little environments within the, and journalists are one, and lawyers are one.
Right.
And by the way, it was a great piece on Attorney Mesa that Jasmine wrote, and it reminds me that, there. My son-in-law just made a movie about attorneys who enabled the civil rights movement, through the middle of the century into the 21st century, and how a lot of those names just don't ever get told. Why? Because you think of lawyers, they're just kind of, they're like, they're doctors. Once they're done, you move on.
Right.
But a lot of attorneys have done some of the most important things. Lawyers have done some of the most important social change and political change and economic change in the country, sometimes, on a pro bono basis. And so I love the idea that we take these things that people think are ordinary or that they understand, and then you show them in a new light. And a new culture, or a different culture, has a whole different vision of how these things work. And that's the power of diversity to me, is points of view. Because if you're trying to figure something out, you need as many eyes on it as you can,
Right.
and you need from as many directions as you can. And we're all trying to figure something out here. Obviously the country's got problems. We all have problems. The world's got problems, and you don't cure those problems by closing your eyes. You're opening them. So you guys are really like a set of open eyes. You're opening eyes,
Right.
and we want to be a part of that. Just getting the vision clear from as many perspectives as we can, so the decisions we make aren't based on our reality tunnels, our echo chambers, or whatever. Get out of that. That's what motivates me.
Excellent. That's really important for our community to hear that. And going back to the immigration, lawyers, it's just like our community doesn't have really much trust in lawyers, because they kind of just show up, when it's at the last minute, and
Right.
you would hope that they'll be there for you fully to walk you through those steps, and we feel abandoned. But to connect any person that we highlight in our show, we vet in and out, because it's important, because we ourselves have been let down with false promises over and over and over again. So any person that we recommend, we vet and we have dealt with personally, which is important. I've had these relationships with these individuals for a really long time, to be able to build that trust and say, hey, we'll hold each other accountable if I'm not doing my part, vice versa. Jasmine,
Right.
This was your first time writing a piece. You've never done this before.
I had never done it before. Yes. Hello, guys. Hi, Ernesto. Hi, Rick.
Jasmine Allen Torres,
Hi, Jasmine.
my producer, my partner.
Yeah. I mean, I've always like dabbled in writing, but it wasn't like something that I thought I could do.
Yeah.
But Rick kind of like kind of put the bug in our ear, and I was like, oh man, like I could finally have the opportunity. And I was so grateful to have the opportunity, because then Rick kind of like evaluated, and he was very straightforward, which I loved, because I was like, okay, I can really hone in on my writing, get better at it. And you know, like you said, like we have so many great stories, so many wonderful guests that you know, it would be awesome to see more, you know, highlighting them, not just on our show, but like in 603 diversity, so that more people can see that, you know, there are more faces like them out there.
Right, bridging that gap.
I think that sounds like a wonderful partnership between the show and the magazine.
Yeah, absolutely. And, you know, it was a really, really awesome opportunity to kind of learn from Rick, and, you know, how to write for a magazine. And I'm a big advocate for, you know, teaching young people, you know, more skills that, you know, especially in journalism, because I feel like there's not enough, you know, Latina journalists out there.
You know what?
You know what I mean? And I'm slowly finding that out, like, okay, there's actually a lot more. And so it kind of gave me an inspiration that I never had before. And so I thank you guys for that. That was awesome.
It was
Jasmine, I just got to say, as somebody who has been writing for a living, pretty much since for more than a quarter of a century, every time Rick touches a story of mine, it gets better.
Yeah.
Yes.
He is a good editor.
Yeah. And you know what? He's very straightforward, which is great, because like I need that, you know, that feedback. And a lot of the times, you know, what happens is that people want to like include you, and because they want to do diversity things. And we have this term called fail up. And sometimes, you know, they're too afraid to say something, but because they want to check off the box, they're like, you know what? Yeah, let's just pass it along. And you fail up. And so, you know, and Rick didn't let me fail up. He was like, no, I need better. And so, you know, and I did. I sat down criticism. And it was constructive feedback that I needed, instead of someone just being like, well, she's Latina, we need this, and, you know, let's throw it in.
Hey,
you know
guys.
what I mean?
Hey, 603 diversity. Look at this Latina editor now.
Yeah. Yeah, writer, yeah.
And she has her own show, and she's doing her own thing.
Yeah.
Congratulations, community, you guys. But it was just awesome to have that, you know, to have that feedback.
And that opportunity, because not a lot of people would, you know, give me the opportunity, because I'm inexperienced, and that's usually what happens, you know?
Here's what I see. Like, speaking from a male's perspective, like, you know, the guys always gravitate towards me because they see, like, oh, Oscar, first gen American. Sometimes I have to slow them down and say, well, I'm first gen American. First gen American amplifies it. Multimedia stabilizes it. And by that, meaning that Multimedia, my partners, you know, a female Latina, that's why the whole dynamic of the business came about, is to have that well balance of having, because for so long I've seen it with my mother, I've seen it with my sister, I've seen it with my aunts, and any friend of my community as a female Latina, they get under recognized. That makes sense. They get unrecognized, and they just don't get valued or appreciated like they need to, because these are creative women that deserve a platform and a chance to evolve. And that this is why we do what we do. This is why I started what I started, to be able to propel that forward and to sustain it. I couldn't have been possible without the female aspect of our community.
Yeah, and it was really awesome to see, you know, other writers that I know in the community, like Noor, and like you said, Roni, and, you know, just to see other writers that, like, for the most part, I usually look up to, because I know that they write. And so to have that opportunity to, you know, have a piece alongside them was really cool.
Yeah, we've had Roni on the show, and I mean, he's just a great ally and just really engaged within the community. So it makes us proud to be a part of this, to have our own magazine and highlight these amazing people. So I thank you guys for that. Truly
Yeah,
amazing.
I should drop a name of somebody I really enjoyed meeting. In fact, I mentioned it because he just wrote me a note asking how things are going, and I haven't gotten back to him to tell him the magazine's almost out. But it's Anthony Payton, who's he works for the Cypress Center in Manchester. He's a cook, you know, and he's had trouble with the law, and he's you know, he's the kind of person that you might disregard. He's a black guy. He's you know, he's a cook, and he's an ex-con.
Yeah.
Okay, well, what do you make of that? Well, he's also a brilliant writer. He's a eloquent speaker. He's got big thoughts, and he's really trying to figure out, the world from the perspective of somebody who had a hard life, and but who doesn't want to put up with that anymore. Wants to make something. He's made a lot out of himself. He's become, he's another figure that people name resonates in the community now. And if we can't help people on the rise, that's really what the media is supposed to be doing, is saying, look at this guy, look at this woman, look at this community. They're doing something different. They're doing something good. Pay attention. We're anticipating something here, so look over here. And sure enough, next year, he's going to be on the cover too. That's the way it works. You got to
Right.
notice. You got to pay attention to stuff, or else you don't ever know what's going on.
Yeah, and I would add to that too. One other name that comes up, not a specific person, but an organization. I think Anthony came across our radar because of his work with the Granite State News Collaborative.
Right.
And they've been doing a tremendous amount of really good journalism, like really strong reporting on hard news issues surrounding diversity.
Yeah.
But they've also been making a really great effort to bring diverse voices into that journalism. And so they're another partner that I think is certainly worth mentioning.
Yeah, we know Granite. We've worked with Granite State News
Yeah,
Collaborative.
we did a really awesome project called "The Flavors of Our Neighbors" with Granite State News Collaborative and New Hampshire PBS.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, so check that out because that's a really really awesome piece. It highlights a lot of Latino restaurant owners here in the state.
The majority of the piece of that was Latina, family owned, family operated, female
Latinas.
Latinas running the show,
state of
which
New
is
Hampshire,
also
yeah.
Flavors of Our Neighbors. Yeah, and it's just amazing how it's all connected and we're all coming together simultaneously. I just hope that this propels us forward to, there's something going on in Nashville right now. There's Greater American Downtown. They're looking for a new executive director, and I would hope that it's somebody within the BIPOC community to let the engagement of other from the other black and brown business owners get the recognition that they deserve, because I think it's time to let the old cats retire and let the young fresh blood in our community, propel us forward. I know that the mentality and especially in these small towns is, if it's not broke, don't fix it. But we're not fixing anything. We're just improving it, So I think it's an opportunity. So just putting it out there in the universe, and maybe, just maybe, some more diversity in the Chamber of Commerce as well. And I'm speaking for my city because I don't know any other else. I think Manchester's doing a phenomenal job, but I think Nashville should follow suit.
Well, I think there's progress to make everywhere.
Right.
And I think there's great opportunities for even for that old guard to really be engaged, and with everything new that's happening, and to bring people along and anyway, but I do know there's definitely a great amount of effort happening here in Manchester as well. That's very heartening.
What are some of the Rick? What were some of the your favorite parts about the magazine that you enjoyed in this edition or the last edition?
Well, what was really a nice. It was sort of a different kind of a story, but we want to do different kinds of stories. But it was Lily Tang Williams' story about coming to New Hampshire, by a long circuit from China, from communist China, and it's something that I think is very timely right now because we're grappling with the implications of having this relationship with a country that is still very democracy has nothing to do with it, and where people's lives can be controlled and destroyed by the government
Right.
with really no recourse. And it's a reminder. It's a nice thing to remind ourselves, in the BIPOC community or the whatever community, that we got something good here and we don't want to lose it. And people still come, they at the risk of their lives and livelihoods to come to this country just because of something that we've got that is not guaranteed. The freedom is not guaranteed, and these cliches about freedom is not free and all that. Well,
Right.
cliches usually have some truth in them, and if we don't keep our minds on the what's the goal, what's the purpose of all this, and it's not control, it's freedom. And so she came here. She had a wonderful story. She actually has some wonderful little photos, and I'm thinking that's the kind of thing that each community has probably got a wonderful piece of history, whether it's from your first gen, show is all about people who just got here, but there's some people whose parents came here at great risk,
Right.
and I'd like us to be able to do more stories about that, what it meant for people to achieve what they've got, and to have come here at all. Without getting maudlin about the country, we've got problems, and that's going to be in here too. But I just love that. That's the story that I thought stood out, and it seemed like it's really timely with the Olympics going on right now.
Yeah, we do that with the we talk about that swinging pendulum all the time, and
Yeah.
for sure we highlight our parents. I mean, to get my mom and dad to talk about their story, sometimes it's just kind of like survivor flight mode, and they tend to forget, or maybe not forget, but just suppress, because they're just like, we're here now. We can't dwell. We sacrificed everything. Now it's for you to. But sometimes we have to deal with some of those sacrifices. Come with a lot of anxiety and that pressure of succeeding, and that's where the mental health is important. That's where we have to talk about the anxiety, the stress, and we can learn from each other. We're learning from each other every single day of how are you dealing and coping with being a first generation American, or being the first one here in this time, and dealing with COVID, or dealing with situations where you can't see your loved ones. It just goes on and on and on. And you would think that these stories are repetitive, but not each journey is the same. So
Right.
we love to highlight this, and we love what you guys are doing to amplify it, and something that our children can see. Like, hey, my son or daughter one day was seeing, and it was like, hey, mom and dad and Auntie Jazz was on the magazine when they first started the business, and now it's for what you guys are doing is setting up the next generation to see us thrive. And I don't think you guys notice what you're doing. You guys are doing something for the future. You are taking the risk on giving us an opportunity when nobody ever did. And I thank you for that. I thank you for that. We thank you for that, because yes, we have allies that will send us messages on private and say, we're so proud, but never, hey, we support you. Here's your platform. We acknowledge you. We'll put you in a magazine. That's different. And I think that can follow suit with a lot of individuals that are listening, that are watching, that you can easily give us a thumbs up, but the recognition, it's completely different.
Well, it even goes.
I love the way.
Oh, sorry. You go ahead.
Oh no, you go ahead, and then
Oh,
I'll go.
I was gonna say, like to his point is the allies thing. I've always said that, being an ally means giving us the microphone,
Right.
and that was
Letting us speak.
yeah for ourselves, and
Don't speak for us.
That's what 603 diversity does. Is
Right.
that it gives us the microphone for the first time.
Well, I really appreciate it. I'm glad I know. I'm glad that's how it that's how it reads, that's how it feels, and that's how it's working. Because that's certainly what we wanted to do, and like what I had mentioned earlier, like how important I thought representation was, and Oscar, when you were talking about, your kids down the road look at and see that you're on the cover of that magazine, it really speaks to um, somewhat to the experience that I had growing up. I grew up in southern Vermont in the 1970s, and there wasn't anybody who was Latino there.
Right.
in maybe the whole state, it felt like, but even in the country, there wasn't national media that reflected that, and that really shaped the way that I felt about who I was, how I looked
Yeah.
to other people, or anything, and I, and that was. And I, there were many great aspects to my childhood, and I was lucky in a lot of ways, but that was definitely a thing that always felt like it was missing. And it really did sort of negatively impact my self-perception as a kid,
Right.
So the idea of, that, potentially the magazine could change the perception of somebody, who gets to see themselves reflected in it as a young person is certainly something that would strike a really powerful chord for me if we succeed in doing that.
Yeah. I think that together, when this is what propels us forward, we're not going to stop anytime soon. So I think that we will keep working side by side together through the speaker and through the print, to be able to amplify these amazing stories, to give them the courage, to give them the sense of hope, the sense of inspiration, to say, hey, my community's being heard. And you know what? And just by that, inspire a lot of individuals that probably never felt heard, to inspire them and say, maybe I should take action. Maybe this is the time. The time is now. We don't do it we're not gloating. We are leading by example. Sometimes it feels like a lot of pressure. Sometimes it feels like a lot of pressure because we're the first ones, but we're not. But a sense of relief because we're not the only ones now, and we're working side by side. So, again, we thank you, Ernesto, Rick, and the whole team at 603 Diversity for just doing such a wonderful thing for our community. It's important.
No,
Yeah.
thank you.
One
Thank
thing
you.
I'd say, if I can throw something in, is that we're confident that we're going to keep doing this for a while, but how long we keep doing it is going to depend upon the sponsorship, which we're getting I hope, Ernesto, I missed the portion where he spoke on, but he may have mentioned some of this. But there's some underwriting organizations that are enabling this, because it's a pretty putting out a glossy magazine ain't cheap. It's everything is expensive about it, and but that's what gives us the class, the quality that we want for for the message that we're trying to get across. And so there are some organizations that are really helping us out. If you pick up a copy, if you know any of those people, tell them thanks. If you really care that much about it, pass the word on that we're doing this to the people that are advertising in it. And part of the point is to underwrite smaller ads. People might not be able to afford to advertise in the publication. So if you see an ad for a business, that's a great place to let them know that you saw it. And I know this, everybody says, but I think the interesting thing about a community of mutual interest that has a sense of itself is that communication is a little easier within that. So, communicate with your friends about this. And if I can throw in one more thing, we had a motto and a T-shirt in this issue that we thought we'd just feature it last issue, but we just never got around to getting T-shirts made. We got kind of bogged down, so we're still waiting on it. It's a beautiful T-shirt designed by Richard Haynes, who's one of the best African American artists you'll ever find, and it's an incredible design. And our motto, "Live Free and Rise," is on this T-shirt. We want to get about 100 orders, and the money's going to go to benefit the Manchester NAACP, who've been kind of helping us out with this a little too. So check out the magazine, and if you really want to, if you want to show your appreciation for 603 Diversity, you can put this T-shirt on your chest and proudly, present our motto to New Hampshire: "Live free and rise."
Live free and rise. I love it. That's perfect. That's well said. I love that quote, actually. I really do. It's completely fresh and unique, and
It's New Hampshire.
it's New Hampshire. Tell me. So what's next? What's next for the future of 603 diversity? Like, you guys, I know we spoke about it a little. Just continue, but maybe we have some potential sponsors that are listening. How can they get involved to help and help our community?
Well, I mean, any potential sponsor that's listening, and we have sponsorship that ranges all the way from, buying an ad, whether it's a full page ad or a fractional page ad. But we also have underwriters who are coming in to really help foot the bill, and their underwriting is then subsidizing advertising for smaller businesses. And so I don't know if you noticed the marketplace type section where, we made advertising very inexpensive for small businesses that would otherwise, based on the cost of that advertising, wouldn't be able to reach nearly that size audience. So there's lots of opportunities all the way from fairly inexpensive to reach a statewide audience up through really stepping up and sort of supporting the effort on a sort of grand level. That's one place that we're going. You mentioned Spanish a little while ago,
Yeah.
in terms of people asking you for Spanish language programming. I would love to do. I'd love to do sections or a version down the road, if we were able to grow this enough. I'd love to do something in Spanish as well. We also, right now, we're scheduled as a quarterly publication. And, I'd like to maintain quarterly for the rest of this year. But then, if we've got the support, I'm sure that we'll have the writers. I'm sure that we have the stories. But if we've got the financial support, I'd like to perhaps grow the frequency of this into, possibly a 10-time a year, magazine, and maybe have a subscription-based circulation to it, as well as the kind of distribution that we're giving it now. But all those are just things that we're exploring. And then down the road, of course, there are also opportunities to add in multimedia components, and maybe that's something that we do through partnerships with people like you. If we're talking about, there really would be natural to have a podcast or a video element to this publication, and so.
Hey, well, we're here. We're here, and we're ready. So
Awesome.
We're hungry, that's for sure.
absolutely. And and it just gives an opportunity, because we're working with I was just on the phone with Black Lives Matter, month of February. I wanted to give them the platform on Asking for a Friend, to be able to give them the recognition that they deserve, and talk about their efforts and what's been going on. And that's something that we're talking about. That's something that's in the works. So shout out to Jordan Thompson and the whole team over there. And again, like all of our wonderful sponsors for making this possible, for keeping us moving forward. And we invite, just because it's 603 diversity, again, we need allies. So we invite sponsors from all communities that, if you really support and you love the trajectory and where we're going forward, give us a shout. Ladies and gentlemen, 603 diversity, Ernesto and Rick, the vice president and the publisher and editor. Thank you guys so much for joining us in the show, and
Thank you. We really appreciate
we
you
really
guys.
appreciate everything, honestly. What an amazing tribute to our community. Thank you so
You guys
Likewise.
Thank you so much for joining
Honored
us
to be
today.
here.
Thank you so much for joining us, and we'll stay in touch. And guys, be on the lookout for 603 Diversity on www.603diversity.com. Check out our edition too. This is Oscar Villacis with Asking for a Friend. Stay safe. Have a good one.